Welcome to this Photoshop training tutorial. In this particular session we're going to look at the replace color command and how we can use it to change the colors of objects in Photoshop. Many ways that we could go around changing color on these objects, but the first thing that we would need to do would be to isolate the individual color of the shoes. So I want to change this part and obviously these parts here, and the same on this shoe here, and maybe this little purpley bit down there and there. I want to make sure that I don't change this little element here or any of the other parts of the picture, so just changing the colors of the shoes. One method would be to maybe take the magic wand tool and to checking your tolerance, maybe switch contiguous off, is that I could try doing that to make an initial selection. You can see it hasn't made a great selection. I could hold down the shift key and start to increase that selection and keep clicking and spend a little while tidying that up. It is getting better. But the problem with using a selection to change color is that by the time that you've made the selection, there are other commands available that maybe could have done it an awful lot quicker. I'm going to do Apple D or Control D on Windows to cancel that selection. Under the Image menu is the Adjustments menu, and for my money a great deal of the power of Photoshop is harnessed under this one menu, and I'm going to use the Replace Color command here. Now, replacing color uses hue, saturation and lightness to do your color correction, so this is very much a what you see is what you get on the screen color correction. We're not really doing it by accurate CMYK values, although we could use our eyedropper and our info palette to look at the projected CMYK values. And how replace color works is it does it via a mask. So in here we're going to build up a mask of the selected areas of the shoes, and then we're going to change their hue and their saturation. First thing to do is the fuzziness value. The default fuzziness value is about 40. If the fuzziness value is too high, then it will select too much, and including the light and the dark areas. So it's to play with once we've made our selection, but you'll see how that goes in a minute. We have three eyedroppers. How these work is that you have the standard eyedropper, the plus and the minus eyedropper. The first thing I'm going to do is to use my standard eyedropper is I'm going to make an initial selection of the purple areas of the shoes that I want to work with. So we can see if we look round that there are some slightly lighter parts to the purple and then the more shadowy areas. So I'm going to try with my standard eyedropper to take a representative mid-sample, and I'm going to select that area there. You can see in my mask now is the white areas in the mask are the selected areas of the shoes that I want to work with, and the black areas in the mask represent the protected areas, i.e. the areas that won't get any color change. It's made a reasonable selection so far, but you can see I'm missing a lot of the shoes in these areas here. So I'm going to go for my plus eyedropper now, and then I'm going to say I want to also add in that slightly darker area there, and you can see how my mask has really improved now. Sometimes I make additional selections, so I've made an additional selection of these slightly lighter areas there, and I'm beginning to build up a good mask, but again it's just creeping in a little area at the back. I could at this stage take my minus eyedropper and say I don't want to include these areas and click to switch those off, and you can see how that's just taken them out in the mask. Personal preference is not really to use the minus eyedropper. I tend to do one selection with this and then a couple of clicks to add further areas of colour, usually the lighter and the darker areas. But then my preference is to do this. I'm now going to move the hue slider, and notice how the colour in the shoes change. So if I start to rotate slowly through the different hues, this goes round the colours of the colour wheel, so it will go from red through purple and into a rather attractive brown. You can see it hasn't done a perfect job, and I can head towards green, say. Quite like the green. You can see that it's missed quite a few areas, so a good little trick here is to take your plus eyedropper, and rather than spending time increasing your mask or even playing with the fuzziness value, you can see that works reasonably well. But of course the other thing is that it has started to colorize the fronts of the shoes. So I'm going to leave my fuzziness value on 40, but with my plus eyedropper you can then just click on the actual image and it will go in and then add those little areas that it didn't get in your initial mask. I'm fairly happy with that. That's made quite a good change of colour, and again I could then change the different hues. So I quite like that green there. At the same time I could choose to then saturate that green more, making it a very vivid, rich, intense, gorgeous green, or I could desaturate the green and then start to move them to a duller, drabber until eventually onto grey. Anyway, I'm going to just slightly drop the saturation. I'm not going to change the lightness. I could choose to make them slightly darker or slightly lighter, but I'm going to stay roughly where it was. I was quite happy with that. So there, a nice quick and easy colour change using Replace Colour. Now, just to tidy up a few areas, and here's the pièce de résistance, I'm going to go for my history brush. And if we have a quick look at our history palette here, and I just make that palette a bit larger, by default the history brush, when you use it, restores from the opening snapshot. This little marker here indicates the restore point, and this is always default to your initial snapshot, the opening state of your image. I'm going to take a hard-edged brush and checking that it's in the normal mode so it will apply solid new paint and that my flow is at 100%, is that I'm now going to click and paint over those areas that I want to restore. And all I'm doing is painting back the original. So I can again paint over here to just restore any change that I've had here. Do the same over this part, just got to close him temporarily and then restore in these areas here, so on and so on. You can see I could then just paint out and get the original manufacturer's name back to where I wanted it. Just check that no other little green tinges have moved in, something like that. So there we go. Finally, I can click the Create Snapshot button to take myself a new snapshot. So then I can double click that snapshot and I can then call it Green Shoes. Then what it allows me to do is it allows me to compare between the original set of shoes and the change set. So there's the original colour of the shoes and there's my new green ones. So there we go, using Replace Colour and then tidying up your work with just a little bit of the history brush afterwards.